Good morning. Ha! Started out way wrong. Good evening, everyone. I know there's some people who are going to jump on. We're going to give it a couple of seconds. I'm going to work on this over here, my Instagram live. Let's see. No. Give people a second, making sure that I have placed it on my wall. And for those of you who are jumping on, I'm Dr. Tori J. I am the founder and CEO of the Fatherless Generation Foundation. And I'm jumping on here. Okay, I get why. I get why. I didn't do it on that one. Tonight we're talking about Toxic Moms Part 2. Last week, you guys really pulled on me. And throughout the week, there were a lot of inboxing, lots of dialogue still on the page. And I thought, this clearly is a topic that needs to be had. And we need to continue to have it. And so what I decided to do was to do Part 2 tonight, but we're going to dig just a little bit deeper. Some of this I know is emotional for some of you. It's not an easy thing. I know several of you have said on in the comment box, hey, I needed this. I needed to hear this. That definitely encouraged me. So I thank you for chiming in and even saying that. It is not, as I said last week, this is not an easy topic for me to have, just simply because sharing sometimes can be a bit much for not just me, but for those who I may be having this conversation about, and they don't necessarily like it. So I'm doing, the best I can in sharing and not trying to hurt anyone, but just trying to help as many people as I can possibly help. So as I am sharing this video that's on the Fatherless Generation Foundation's page to my personal page, I want you guys to share it, send it out to as many friends as you think need this and want to know more about it. Post it on your page, share it with your friends right now as I'm sharing it on my page as well. And then I'm going to also get Instagram up here. I get now why it didn't come on. Because I was really trying to put it on my phone and put it in airplane mode so that I wouldn't get disturbed on this. But that doesn't work when you need Wi-Fi on Instagram. So tonight I'm going to, once again, have this conversation on Instagram as well as Facebook Live in order to help free us from this journey of toxic moms. One of the things that I know I need to do is to I need to redefine toxic moms, because we talked about it last week. We really dug into it. I'm grateful and happy to know that people are on here from last week and they will be chiming in. Hey, Melissa, they'll be chiming in as well. And I say this all the time. I don't want you to think that this is about me talking. Please don't do that. I want you to engage. I want you to add in the comment box, because your addition to the conversation also brings healing to someone. I don't have all the answers. I still have part of my journey. I might be a little further along than some of you in the journey. I might have made some missteps along the journey that we'll talk about later on as we get into this. Hey, Ghostwriter, how are you? We're going to continue to dig into this, and we're going to dig deep tonight, because tonight is more about us. Tonight is more about how this has impacted us and how we've actually responded to it, so that we can not only be okay with walking away from it, but have some major steps and tools in order to ensure that we're not continuing to do what we don't want to do to someone else, right? So I'm going to post some of these articles. I've posted a few for you guys last week. I think it was one I posted last week. The breakdown and the psychology behind having a toxic parent and what that looks like for us as we've gone through this life's journey, right? I want you guys to read those. I think they're very important. Once again, I don't have all of the answers, but as I find more information and opportunities for you guys to read about this, and that you're not the only one, right? You're not the only one. It can help you navigate, get over whatever. Maybe we didn't discuss it during the last call, but it'll give you some more insight. So if we're going to define toxic mothers, I'm going to go back to my notes from last week. The truth of the matter is, toxic mothers have a particular characteristic. They're super critical. They have a controlling behavior. They're guilt tripping and manipulative. There's some humiliation involved in this. They never validate, or very rarely validate, your emotions. Hey, Celeste, I hope you are feeling better. I did see your post. I need you to feel better. I read that and I definitely didn't know, but my prayers are with you. Trust me. The other thing beyond they don't validate your emotions is they're passive aggressive, they're disrespectful to your personal boundaries, and it's a one-sided relationship. So when we define toxic mothers, we have to remember that they probably had a toxic parent too, right? That's the thing you have to know. I don't want us to get off into a place where we're just constantly bashing our mothers. I want us to be in a place where we're clear that maybe our mothers too had a toxic mother. And because of that toxic mother, they then became a toxic mother. We don't create patterns majority of the time. We repeat them. And in repeating the pattern, our mothers just didn't know what to do. The other thing that we have to know about toxic moms is they never learn, they're never self-reflective, and nor do they truly care about anybody's feelings that they're hurting. I call it, when my mama says, she'd be like, I'm keeping it 100. I'm keeping it real. She has used the vernacular of the children in order to validate her keeping it real. But how many of you know when you keep it real with someone who's toxic, they can't handle it? Oh, you done really hurt their feelings? They super sensitive. Super sensitive, which is, it's hard for me to understand that part of the journey, but it is the truth. Okay, so let's get into this. Let's look at toxic moms' influence on our behaviors and relationships, friendships, and self-esteem and self-care. That's what I want to talk about tonight. I want to talk about us tonight. Is that okay? Is it okay if I get into us? Because we can talk about them all day long. We can have a full-on conversation about how toxic our moms are. And we could go on and on and on. And I learned that from watching everybody last week. It's not a negative thing. It's just what it is. We can have that conversation multiple times. So this is something also I need you to know. If your mom is toxic, you need to know that growing up with this kind of parent has tremendous influence on your relationships, your friendships, and your self-care. Those are the three things we're going to get into tonight. Tremendous, because we think, yeah, hey, Nydia, we think that it's going to be about, like, oh, well, we grew up with this toxic mom, and so it has nothing to do, like, we'll grow up and we'll grow out of it, or we'll move on. We're going to talk about some stuff tonight. So the influence on our relationships. We're going to talk about 7 ways our toxic moms influence our relationships. You need to get a pen, piece of paper. Once again, please share this with your friends that you know need this. I think so often, as we've learned last week, we feel guilty as daughters because you see people who have these great mother-daughter relationships and you want that relationship with your mother and you're wondering why you don't have it. And it really causes a lot of stress and a lot of pressure, and it causes you to go back and forth with this mother who is toxic versus cutting her off, putting boundaries, and demanding the change that's necessary. And as you're going back and forth, you're inflicting more and more trauma on yourself. We cannot change the fact that our mom may have been or continues to be toxic. We can't change that. There's nothing you can do about that. So stop feeling guilty about that. And I'm going to say this as well, because it came up multiple times last week, and it came up after the airing and people watching the replay. Do not allow somebody to manipulate you with scripture, telling you, my mother used to use different ones, but I'm going to go with the ones that people used to tell me all the time. Oh, you're a minister, and the Bible tells you to honor thy mother and thy father so that your life will be long, right? There are other scriptures that tell you that you can have a long life based on serving God and worshiping God and all of that. However, that is not the end of the scripture. We have to get scripture in context and get it fully. The scripture also tells parents, do not provoke your children to wrath. And if anything provokes children to wrath, it's a toxic mama, okay? So don't let people manipulate you to stay in a toxic environment by using scripture or by using things that say, oh, it's the only mother that you have. You only got one mama. That's true. And I can say for my mother, she's only got one daughter. So therefore, you might not want to create an environment where it's toxic. Because what that does is it makes us not want to have a relationship with you. So let's get into the 7 ways that toxic moms cause us issues and ways that they impact our relationships. Y'all ready? If y'all ready for it, say, put a 1 in the box. 7 ways that toxic moms cause issues in our romantic, and we're in the romantic relationships because y'all think y'all got that sewn up, and you don't. Because as much as your fatherlessness has impacted your relationship or relationships, your toxic mother and the behavior has done the same. You've got to know it's not a surprise when you have a lot of relationships. Thank you, Nydia, for putting the 1 in the box. Everybody else is like listening. I get it. But it's not a surprise that when you start dating someone and when you begin to date them, thanks, Chris, certain things start to come up and you don't recognize, like, where did that come from? Where and how did that come from me? Because you didn't expect it. You were like, I didn't know that this was who I was. So when you're dating people and things come up that come from your childhood and your relationship with your toxic mother, don't be surprised, because the other person may be surprised, but I don't want you to be surprised, because the more that you get into relationships, they begin to reveal certain things. Now, I can tell you that I truly believe that marriage, being the covenant that it is, will reveal things on a deeper and greater level because it's the safe place for you to heal. You won't necessarily get the level of reveal or revelation about yourself in just dating someone as you will when you're married to them, because most times if you're just dating them, it's not a safe place to heal. So be careful what you allow to be revealed and then what you put on the table with someone that you're not married to. Marriage is, as some people are going to put on here, marriage is not a guarantee, but it's more of a guarantee because it's a covenant. And dating someone and telling them and sharing certain things with them, it opens you up for disaster. And you don't know if that person is toxic as well until you start dating them more and getting into their relationships as well and their upbringing. And let me say this before I get into the fullness of the 7 ways. Be careful who you draw and who you date, because you could be drawing a toxic person unknowingly, because you still have a part of you that desires to be validated, that desires to get that perfect parent like the mother that you always wanted. And so you get these fixer-uppers that are way more of a fixer-upper than you're supposed to have, because you're still looking for a perfect mother. So just be careful. Another book that I've recommended several times is Safe People. You can go through the timeline and find it. So one way that our toxic mother impacts our current romantic relationships, I'm going to say current, is it's the communication and respect. It may be hard to come by. You know why it may be hard to come by? Because when you grow up with a toxic mother, you don't develop the interpersonal communication skills and the respect, because it just wasn't given in your home. And because it wasn't given in your home, you don't develop those things. Some of you talk in a way to the person that you say you love and you say you're in relationship with that is not healthy. And it becomes emotionally and verbally abusive. Or you're a stonewaller, you have defenses up because that's what you were taught. Have no emotions, suppress your emotions. Living in a toxic environment where communication may have not been valued and your feelings may have not been recognized or validated can cause you to display the same behaviors as your mother. How many of you know that? How many of you grew up and was like, I'm never going to be like my mama. I'm never going to do anything like my mama. See, come on, you have no voice. I'm never going to be like my mother. And then you get in a relationship and you squash and suppress the person's voice that you're in a relationship with. We learned last week, one of the mothers said, I became the toxic mother, wrote a book about it, like to hear, here it goes. And I had her post it in the comments because you guys will silence someone. No voice, no validation, or you've learned how to talk harshly to somebody. One thing I will tell you right now is I've been married almost 5.5 years. And one thing I do not do is talk harshly to my husband. I don't care. And my mother is, whoo, she can talk. She can talk real harsh. This dog, every time I get on camera, he knows I'm on the camera. Say hi, Tokyo. Say hi. He just finished his dinner. He smelled like fish. Smell the salmon. But I can tell you that is not something I do. You know why I don't do it? Because I didn't like it when it was done to me. And another reason I don't do it is because of the simple fact that we are all human beings and we are all created by God. And who am I to talk to him in a way that God wouldn't even speak to him? That's very clear to me. So we have to be careful how, especially ladies, how you talk to your man can be an issue. And it can be a real struggle. And when you look back on it, you might be talking to him the way that you do because your mother talked to you in a certain way. And you just grew up and you said, I would never, 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 never be like my mother. And then, yes, Celeste, Tokyo. And then before you know it, you're in a relationship and you're just like your mother. Just like your mother. You have to be cautious of that. And it has to do with you didn't learn how to communicate. You didn't learn the interpersonal communication skills that you needed in order to have a successful relationship, nor did you respect the person because you weren't respected. Not by this person, but by your mother. We're all guilty, Nydia, so don't worry about it. Nydia says right here, I'm going to post this because this is the beauty of doing Be Live tonight. It's insane how you learn to talk crazy to people. You learn to talk crazy to people you love, but you don't do it to strangers. Come on, because you don't know how that stranger going to respond. That might be a problem. And Nydia says, I'm guilty. She says right here, I'm guilty. Once again, there's some people, hey Sean, hey Smash Jet, how are you? And I see that girl on here. I'm going to tell you guys right now, let me reiterate this. We're not on here to bash our mothers. We're not. We're on here to be better people in spite of the toxic mothers that we had. That's what we're here on to do. So number one, we said it is communication and respect may be hard to come by because we had mothers who talked to us like they were crazy and we heard them talk to other people like they were crazy. Number two, you might constantly seek validation from your partner. Affirmation is one thing, baby, and advice. Like we get into what our love languages are. And words of affirmation is one of them that people have, right? We have words of affirmation. How often do you need that affirmation? Do you need it often? Do you need agreement all the time? Why do you need that? It has to do with what Nydia was saying earlier. When you have no voice, you're screaming to be heard. You're the middle child in a sense. Nobody listening to me. Are they not listening to you? Or are you displaying characteristics of growing up in a toxic environment with a toxic parent who didn't validate you? That's something you need to know. So I want you, if you display the need to have, because I want more communication. If you display the need to have validation all the time in your relationships, I want you to put a 1 in the comment box. If there is no need for validation, or, I don't need affirmation, I'm good, put a 2 in the box. 1 if you need that validation all the time. Be honest with yourself. Put a 1 in the box. If you don't need it, it's just normal. Like every now and then, I'm good. Put a 2 in the box, because we all need a little bit. See, when you grow up in an environment, Celeste said 1 and 2. Depends on the situation. I get it. When you grow up in an environment that doesn't validate your feelings, you always question your feelings. How many of you feel that way? Thank you, Daniel. Daniel's like, I don't need that often. And I would tell you, most guys probably don't need the affirmation and the validation as much as women do. They need it in a different way. Y'all want to see? Look at Tokyo. Look at him. He is laid out. Yes, he needs validation right now while I'm on this screen. He needs validation right now and all the love. So when you grow up in these environments where there is no validation, and then this child becomes an adult, you will not trust your own feelings. And if you don't trust your own feelings, you know you're not trusting the other person's feelings, right? And even and you then seek all of this external validation, that's the part that is challenging. You have to learn the tools in order to trust your feelings and remove self-doubt. I can tell you it depends on the situation. I'm like Celeste, depends on the situation. But the doubt. It becomes a constant cycle of head trash that I have to truly deal with. Doubting yourself is completely understandable when you grew up learning to do so. You learned that you should doubt yourself. You learned that you can't trust yourself. Okay, see, Daniel, there it is. Daniel said, I was like that a lot at first until I broke a lot of the cycle. That's truth. I got you, Celeste. So here we go. How many of you romanticize relationships? That's number 3. So number 1, we're going to go back to, is the communication and respect is hard to come by. Number 2, you might constantly seek validation from your partner. And number 3, you romanticize romantic relationships. Now, this is a tough one because we all like flowers and women like to be treated like ladies and dates and all of that. But do you take it a little too far? Do you take it a little too far by having an expectation that this man or this woman is going to look like it's going to look in the movies, right? You want these whirlwind romances. You want this perfect person who does everything right, takes every step and does it correctly. And that's not a real relationship. Relationships have ups and downs, pitfalls. Hold on. Lydia, girl, you over here got me laughing. She said, I'm about to log off because you're talking about me. I said we were going to talk about us tonight. We're going to get off our mamas and we're going to talk about us. It's more about us tonight than anything. And Nydia, the reason I really took that approach, because we're going to get into something a little bit at the end, but I took this approach tonight because it came up on one of my girlfriend's pages as well. And she said, some of you can't have a relationship or friendship with your girlfriends, like your homegirls, because your mama was your original mean girl. What? What you say? Can't have friendships, because we're going to get into that too. You can't have friendships with guys and girls, opposite sex, just platonic friendships, because your mama was the original mean girl. You see all these chicks on TV throwing stuff on each other, fighting each other over dudes or whatever that is. Is that because your mama was the original mean girl? Shout out to Mel B for posting it that way, because that was like, oh, in my mind. So back to romance. You often romanticize romance and seek perfectionist in this ideal situation because you're on a quest for the perfect parent. And I've used that quote. That's a quote from Reverend Sherry Heller. She actually said this. She's a psychotherapist. And when she said that, I was like, whoa. So we're romanticizing this and we're chronically seeking a perfectionist ideal that resembles the quest for the perfect parent in our relationships. Does your partner have to be perfect? I can tell you right now, I see a lot of women who are single, who they got these long lists. And that list, I'm gonna tell you, I'm not telling you my marriage is perfect because it's got a lot of stuff going on and it's issues, right? But I didn't have this crazy list of expectations that he needed to be perfect in order to be with me, in order to be married to me. Some of you have a list that is just ridiculous. It's not going to happen. And you're going to stay single and you're going to be like, well, God said he was going to send me a husband. He sent him. You know that story about the dude, he drowned and they done send a boat, a helicopter and all that. God done sent all them dudes to y'all. But you didn't want someone who had a few issues, or you didn't want certain types of baggage. And what you have to realize, and this is just straight out my spirit, what you have to realize is some of the stuff you've gone through is your superpower to help the man that God has sent to you to get through. Say it again. Some of the stuff you've gone through is your superpower, your anointing to help the man that God has sent to you in order for him to get through. Brooklyn, I see you over here. You put a number 2 in there. I see you over here. You like, I don't need that much. When the man or the woman, but mostly the man, does not fulfill the fantasy, guess what happens? Rage and despair kicks in because it's triggering your toxic mother. And guess what? As I've been saying lately, guess what you do? Guess why? You know, kids say that all the time. Guess why? Guess why you then become enraged and despair is kicked in? Because it's triggering you. It's triggering your behavior that you learned from your mother. And then where do we go from there? Then, because let's have this real conversation. Then you start tapping into all of this dysfunctional stuff that your mother did to the father of your children. Making him jump through hoops. Oh, I'm not withholding him from the children. Oh, or you this person. Oh, my children be fine without a dad. I didn't grow up with one, so I'm good. They're good. They'll be fine. While you're triggered. While you're in the midst of the triggering. They'll be fine. There it is. It triggers that abandonment feeling, that feeling of not being heard and being rejected. Absolutely. And instead of you acknowledging that it's what it's triggering, you then find yourself enraged and in a place of despair. And when rage comes in, because I say it all the time, y'all keep acting like little girls don't get angry like little boys. And little boys who are enraged and little girls who are enraged grow up to be, or angry boys and girls grow up to be enraged or raging men and women. It's what it is. And then y'all take that stuff out on each other in your relationships where children are involved. Because now, because you needed this romanticized relationship, you needed this situation that was a whirlwind romance. You barely knew the person. You didn't know if they wanted kids. You don't know much about their parenting style. You don't even know much about their upbringing. And now you have children with an individual that you hardly know anything about. And then you're repeating the cycle because you chose them out of this need to find this perfect parent, out of this need to have someone in your life who would love you and not abandon and reject you. And the crazy part is, because you're not healed and whole, you pick the same type of person. You pick the same type of person that your father and your toxic mother happen to be. Because I'm going to tell you right now, one of the reasons we're talking about toxic mothers is because it was something that I was inboxed multiple times, and people asked me even on some of the other Facebook Lives that I did on Healing Tuesday. But I'm going to tell you right now, so many of you have romanticized even the relationship between your mother and father, and your father has become the villain and your mother has become the victim, not recognizing that they were drawn to each other more than likely from a toxic and dysfunctional place. So your mother is not off the hook in the way that you would like her to be off the hook. And I'm not on here to bash moms or single moms. I'm here to tell you the truth about how some of us were conceived and how some of us have even conceived and repeated the cycle. We are repeating the cycle. We are choosing men and women who will do the very same thing to us that our dysfunctional parents have done to us. Number 4, you have a difficult time setting up boundaries. You have a difficult time setting up boundaries. If you have had a relationship with a toxic mother, you have a true struggle setting up boundaries. And it's due to the fact that your mother didn't have any boundaries with you. Oh, cut it out. I'm about to remove you. I'm sorry. You can't say that on my live. You got to go. Sorry. Somebody over here was talking trash. Lord Jesus, help us. Always. Those boundaries aren't set up the way that they should be simply because your mother didn't set them up. Your mother made you her best friend. Your mother made you whatever it was she made you. Your mother made you as a son, made you as her son, her boyfriend, the head of the household, the person who was in charge. And you're none of that. You're just the son. So not having those boundaries, this is what they do as well. They cause you to go through a revolving door. And this is what the revolving door looks like. You and your mother have a spat. You have a real argument. You have a real situation happen. I'm done. I'm not talking to you no more. Blah, 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 blah. You may not talk to her for a couple of days. And then she calls you. She say, I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. Or whatever she may say. And it looks like everything's good again. And guess what you do? You go right back. No boundaries. No, if you do this again, this is what's going to happen. None of that. And then give it another chance and she'll do it again. And guess what? You fight again, you go through it again, and then you disappear. And it may be for a week or two next time. Guess what happens? She calls you or something happens. Maybe a real life situation happens in the family. Somebody dies or somebody gets into an accident, somebody gets sick. And then you're pulled in again based on that situation, which is not a bad thing. But then you're pulled in fully and you haven't set up any new boundaries. And then you're in it and you're like, okay, this looks different. Before you know it again, punched in the face. I will give you an example of something that happened. I don't typically go home much with my husband. It's not something I do simply because I thought I was protecting him, but I'll tell you, I think I was protecting my mother because I don't think she wants to see that particular side of my husband. And so in protecting my husband, we did go to Michigan at one point, and because I have this weird relationship, this back and forth. Hey, Isaiah, how are you? I have this relationship with my mother that is not always easy. Found myself waiting for it, right? And she'd say something and I'd be like, not literally, but my communication. Be like, hey, I'll be ready to fight. And I remember going into my room at my mom's house, and I went into my room and I started crying. And I looked at my husband. I said, I look crazy, don't I? He said, yeah. You do. I said, I'm so used to her punching me that now I'm in a position where I'm like, I'm trying to punch her before she punches me, and I'm the one who looks crazy to the people watching. That's nuts. We have to be better because our responses is what gets us in trouble. Our responses to toxic mothers is what causes people to think that we're not who we say we are, or it's something wrong with us. Because once again, when it's your mother, people are going to believe your mother over you until they actually experience it from her. And you have to be okay with that. What did Nydia say here? Nydia said, even as a daughter, I was the one who put everything together for her, cutting the grass, taking care of her emotionally as a little girl. Oh yeah, we have a tendency, and I'm assuming, I'm pretty sure you grew up in a single parent household, Nydia, just because of your responses to things. We take on our parents' emotions and we do everything to people please to ensure that they're emotionally together and stable, because that toxic mother influence, we don't want it. I used to, my brother. Growing up, mom leaves the house. Guess what mom says? When I come back, I want this, this, and this done, right? It's chores, it's Saturday. So guess what needs to be done when she comes back? And you better guarantee, because I'm the oldest, you better bank on her coming back early. So I'm the one who's like, oh my God, okay, we got to get this together. My brother would be playing with his friends. He'd be playing video games. He'd be doing all this other stuff. And I'd be like, you got to get it done. Otherwise, we're going to get in trouble, right? And it wouldn't necessarily, because I'm the oldest, it's going to fall on everybody. Because I'm the oldest, it's going to fall on all of us, right? Especially me. So he's not just going to get a whooping. And how many of y'all grew up in a household? Sometimes your mom, the other child or children are going to get a whooping, but she might swing the belt one way to hit you just because she might have missed something. Yeah, I wasn't banking on that. I didn't want any of that. So what would I do? I'm doing his chores for him, or I'm harassing him to get them done because I'm a people pleaser. That's how I learned to be a people pleaser. In my toxic mother's household, I learned I needed to people please, because if I people pleased, it was for my mother, then I wouldn't get in trouble. I didn't like being in trouble. Being in trouble was a problem for me. So in order not to be in trouble, I'm going to try to do everything right and perfect. And then guess what was expected of me? Perfection. Perfection was expected of me. And there's no one perfect on this planet. None of us are perfect. And so therefore, that developed into a really horrible habit. It developed into a habit that I don't even know. I know I broke it at this point, but I don't know when I did. I just knew it was something I needed to break. But having a difficult time with boundaries, we're going back to the boundaries. You'll find yourself people pleasing. You'll find yourself going around in a circle trying to make this person happy, who they're never going to be happy with you, because there's nothing that you could actually do that's perfect enough to make them happy. So you grow up as a kid as a people pleaser, as and people pleasers never set boundaries. There are no boundaries. And then you're no longer just people pleasing for your mother. Then you get into these romantic relationships, and then the romantic relationships, then in order to keep them and not be rejected and not be abandoned, guess what you do? You people please. And when you don't have any boundaries and you're a people pleaser, you open the door for you to be mistreated. You open the door for you to have yourself in dangerous situations where you're verbally abused, you're emotionally abused, and unfortunately for some, you are physically abused. Setting boundaries may be one of the most difficult things for you to do, but I said it last week, you need to get the book Boundaries. Boundaries will help you. It is about you and not just about them. You people please for them to stick around. Exactly, Nydia. You people please because you don't want to have that same feeling of rejection. Number 5, you struggle to trust your partner. When you grow up with a toxic mother, you struggle to trust your partner. You find it super difficult to trust people. You find it difficult because in your toxic household, You learn coping skills to survive in that environment. And then you can't unlearn the behavior. And so you leave the toxic home and you try to form and create new relationships. And guess what? You're always on the defensive. Remember I said I was like this every time she she gonna say something crazy. And so you thinking that everybody around you is toxic. Although in these romantic relationships, you don't always treat them that way. You give them carte blanche to everything, although you don't trust them. And I've seen it. I can't tell you that I've done it, but I've seen it. This is something that I wrote down. We think of relationship patterns as pervasive. Therefore, a person who grows up with a toxic mother may have difficulty in romantic relationships, but we don't realize that those things trickle into their friendships or with persons in position of authority. Okay. Now, y'all might have missed it, but on my personal page, because I was very unprofessional, I talked about the video that's going around that I did post on TFGF's page about what Jay-Z said about the whole adverse reaction to authority. When you grow up with a toxic mom and an absent father, you do have issues with authority. And you have those issues and they trickle into not only your friendships, but at your job. That's what they mean. At your job. So you think your career is on lock? You think this has nothing to do with your career and your accomplishments? I promise you it does. It's why I put the post up there the other day where I said, do not think that your accomplishments are a cure-all to your fatherless journey. They are not. Your accomplishments are just that. And for some of you, your accomplishments is a big old F you to your daddy and your toxic mama because your daddy wasn't there and your mother was toxic. I made it without you. It's not true. You're still broken with higher education. You're broken with a PhD. Get out of here. You still have to fix that part of you. And number 7, did I hit number 6? No, number 6. You expect the same of them as your mom expected of you. Oh, Lord Jesus. Here we go. You have turned into the critical, manipulator, humiliator, controller, and everything else. Those are the 2 I want to hit on that you said you wouldn't be. That's who you turned into. You turned into that person. You looked yourself in the mirror growing up. I will never, 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 never be like my mother. I have to be very careful with the critical part. The rest of it, I'm telling you, I don't do. But I have to be very, very careful with the critical part. Being very critical of something and how they move and what they do. I have to be very intentional not to do that. I have to be very, very, it's like a fine line. And I was reading it today and I was talking to my husband about it today. There's a fine line between complaining and being critical. There's a fine line between voicing your opinion, having a voice like Nydia said, and being critical. And we have to learn that when we come from these environments, when we come from toxic homes, when we come from homes with absent fathers, and we didn't get the development that we needed. What we got was the dysfunction that they knew. That we got the dysfunction that they grew up with. We got the cycle, the dysfunctional cycle, the generational curse. I've heard it multiple times on different pages where people would try to say, oh, we're not responsible for the sins of the father. Y'all better quit playing with me, messing with these scriptures and playing with them. The scripture says, y'all ready? The scripture says that the sins of the father are visited upon the 3rd and 4th generation. And most times folks don't even talk about it, so you don't know what's visiting you. You just kind of accept it for what it is. Because most times your parents haven't even shared with you the times and the issues in which they have, I'm sorry, it's dog, the issues that they have growing up. They didn't share it with you. So what makes you think that you're equipped to not take on the sins of your father visiting you? But the beauty of that scripture is breaking it. Sins of the father visit upon the children to the 3rd and 4th generation. But if you break it, guess what? The blessing of the father falls upon to thousands of generations, 1,000 generations, 1,000. Why wouldn't we break it? Why wouldn't we break it? No, you're not going to get up and down. We have to break it. And so to have that same expectation, to be that critical person and have these unrealistic expectations and these standards that we hold people to, that our mother held us to, that we could not stand, break the cycle. Be intentional. Before you respond to something, ask, is this triggering my fatherless journey? Is this triggering my toxic relationship with my mother? Is this person telling the truth about me? Or am I about to respond from a place of triggering, a place of my core beliefs about myself, a place of me not feeling worthy and me not feeling loved and appreciated, me feeling worthless, me feeling ashamed? Because a lot of boys feel ashamed, and we talked about that as well. They feel ashamed about their fatherless journey. And so when your wife is speaking to you or your girlfriend is speaking to you, do you answer from the place of hearing shame? Or are you literally hearing what she's saying? Pause. Listen. Chris, I'm going to find it for you just because you asked. Because I didn't have it jotted down, but I know it because I've spoken it multiple times. I want to get it for you right now before I move on to number 7. And it's mentioned multiple times. And I'm going to tell you, Bible Gateway is typically my favorite. And I'm using Safari. They're trying to take me someplace else. It's Exodus 25:6. Yeah. We have to be intentional. Gotcha. We have to be intentional. Because if we're not intentional, we fall right back into the same traps and right back into the same dysfunction that our parents taught us. And that's not something we want to do. You wouldn't be on here if you wanted to do that. You would want to be, you wouldn't take your time to do that. You wouldn't. You wouldn't get on here right now tonight and spend time listening to me and dialoguing with me if you wanted to stay in this place. So I need for you to understand and being intentional. There's a couple more things I want to hit. I know relationships to me was the most important one because we just don't recognize it. And I can tell you right now, for those of you who are going through parental alienation, you're more than likely dealing with someone who had a toxic mother and who is now a toxic mother because they are repeating the cycle. And so digging into their past and understanding who they are and where they come from is super important in order to get out of that parental alienation, because you have to then maneuver with them in a way that has nothing to do with you and everything to do with them. I've heard many conversations where people say, oh, she's toxic, or she's a narcissist. That may be true, but if it's not diagnosed, just be careful in saying that. I want you to understand the pathology of where these people come from, where we come from. Our parents were in our shoes at one point in time. Their parents were in our shoes at one point in time. And now some of you have relationships with individuals who co-parenting seems almost impossible, but it has a lot to do with the fact of their upbringing and the foundation in which their adult life was built on. And it's very shaky and it's very cracked. And one of the things you need to do more than anything, we talked about it last week, you need to forgive, but you need to be praying for your children while they're in the care of these individuals. You need to be praying for them. So I don't want to go over time too much tonight. So the influence toxic moms has on our friendships, when you grow up with a toxic mother or parent, you have a greater propensity to become toxic yourself. Can y'all, somebody type that in there? My husband is at work tonight, so he can't type it in there like he did last week. Bloodline. Yes, Regina, exactly. When you grow up with a toxic parent, mother particularly, you have a greater propensity to become toxic yourself. How do you become toxic? I'm gonna just run through a couple of these because I'm gonna point out who I was. Can I do that? Can I be, and I'm about to be as vulnerable and as transparent as I can get on here. When you grow up with a toxic parent, you become a toxic person. And if you don't take the time to heal it and become everything God said that you were supposed to be, you will ruin those friendships with those individuals and family members and other relationships. I hear you, Celeste. Yep. I'm glad you are doing this as a look at us moment. I realize I have more work to do. We are all a work in progress, and we have to understand that. We didn't get here by accident. Unfortunately, there's some real things in motion that create who we are, and we don't necessarily like it. So let me give you some versions of what toxic people look like, because we talked about what our toxic mama looked like, but this is a little more in depth about who we may show up as after growing up with a toxic mother. We're the controller. Nobody should have to ask permission or be heavily directed on what to wear or how to look or how to spend time with or how to spend their money. But however, this person, and some of us have had these people in our lives, they want to control how you work and move and do, and why can't you do this? And these relationships aren't healthy. This is a friendship I'm talking about. I'm not talking about a man. I'm not talking about somebody you're romantic with. I'm talking about you got a homegirl or a homeboy who's super controlling. Your mind is so strong, it should be caged in. Like, it's off the charts is what this particular article said. And you think that you should just be free to say and do whatever it is you want to do. And you have truly unhealthy relationships. You crush every relationship that you find yourself in. That's number one. That's the controller. The taker. All relationships are about give and take. But if you're with a taker, you'll be doing all the giving and they'll be doing all the taking. Now, can I tell you, I was the taker. In my homegirl relationships, I was the taker. Wasn't necessarily always monetary or something like that. That wasn't the thing. I would always be the one I needed to talk about my stuff and my situation and what was going on with me and how I moved and what I needed and blah, blah. That's who I was. I was the taker. I was the emotional succubus. I would suck your energy out. Surprised I still have these friends. I had to learn to balance. I will tell you, one time my best friend was like, it ain't about you today. It ain't about you today. And I was like, oh. Yeah, Regina, she told me, she's like, not you today. Because I had to learn to balance, to check in, right? When you get the right friends, they're going to check you. And they're going to tell you. And so then you go, oh, okay, let me check in with them first. Not out of being in a place of, and we could do that and then say, okay, as long as they're good, now I can go. No. You want to check in with them from a place of honesty and genuinely wanting to know if they're okay. And if you're not doing that, then you're not a good friend. You're a taker. You are a taker. I can tell you my response to my mother was take. That was my response to her. And in that being my response, I found myself in a world of hurt. Because, how do I say this on here? I want to make sure I say this right. Ooh-wee! See? I didn't want to. Oh, Jesus. Okay. So there was a season in my life where I recognized how to pay my mother back. How many of you found your parents' weak spot? I did. So when my mother was toxic, I was in my 20s when I did this. So when my mother was toxic, I would pay her back. How would I pay her back? So let's go beyond how I would pay her back. Let's start at the beginning, because this is my very vulnerable and off the charts moment that I'm in my head. I'm like, do I say it or don't I say it? At 12 years old, I was molested. And at 12 years old, he was the morning babysitter. And so he promised me this and that, and he would give me this and all these things if I didn't tell. Well, growing up, I was very close to my mother before I became an adult, when she became a toxic mother. That's something we talked about last week. My mother was not a toxic mother. At least I didn't feel like she was when I was a child. I felt like she became a toxic mother when I became an adult. And a lot of women on here said, oh yeah, I know that feeling. So when I was 12 years old and this happened, there was no question in my mind that I was telling. I was like the little kid, like, ooh, I'm telling, because my mom gonna get you. And when my mother didn't get him, it really bothered me. And one day I saw an envelope that was slipped underneath the door. And it was an envelope from the gentleman who had molested me after I had told. And my mother definitely checked him and said some things to him, but it didn't go much further than that. I don't know all of the details. I know the police were called, but something didn't happen. I don't know how he wasn't arrested. I can't tell you that. I was 12. However, when I saw the envelope, I handed it to my mother. And in handing it to my mother, she opened it right in front of me, and it was 10 crisp $100 bills from the gentleman who molested me. At 12, I recognized, if you want to mess up her day, you mess with her money. So when my mother became a toxic mother when I was in my 20s, she would say things to me that were very hurtful. And I would find myself slithering, because I'm going to call it what it is, slithering into her bedroom and taking her credit card. And while she was asleep, I would be at Dillard's shopping. And by the time she would get home, or I would get back to Atlanta, I was in Atlanta. And I would have already gone shopping on her because of what she said to me. So that was my way of paying her back. I don't say that without any remorse in my heart, because there was lots of remorse. Because later on, this is why I'm talking about us tonight. You have to recognize that your response to somebody is going to get you in a whole lot of trouble. That doesn't look good on me when my mother's able to share that with people. That doesn't look good on me when my mother can say, oh, well, she stole from me. I didn't see it as stealing. I saw it as payback. In my 20s, that's what I saw it as. And so when you look at that and you recognize that your response as a taker is not only hurting her now, but it's hurting you, you have to make a decision for you and say, this is not going to work for me. And so how then do I become better at dealing with this person that's in my life that is toxic? And it's not my fault. I did not create it, but it's what I have. So how now am I going to maneuver as a human being where it doesn't hurt me? That's the part you've got to get with you about. That's the part you've got to get in therapy. If you can't get with you, you got to journal. You got to find outlets for it, because I'm telling you, it's the place my mother has been able to use multiple times to get people to think, oh, Tori's a horrible person. Now I'm 45 now. That doesn't happen. It hasn't happened in decades. However, she still is able to use that as a way to get people to think that I'm not who I say I am. And so if anyone's on here and you're thinking about your reactions and how you respond to your mother and what that looks like, I'm telling you, you can't respond to her that way. Because your response, me as the taker, took from my mother, literally, because I recognized her weak spot. I found it, and then I responded appropriately to it. And that's how I looked at it. And it didn't happen once, it happened multiple times. I had a wardrobe, you hear me? It was the thing that I knew to do, because I knew it was the thing that bothered her. Not right, though. It's not about paying our mothers back. It's about finding a place of love, forgiveness, and respect and boundaries for them. And once again, I said this to you guys last week. Just because they're your mothers doesn't mean that they don't get a Selah moment. I have not spoken to my mother and heard her voice in over a year at this point. She can text me on my MacBook Pro if something's going on or there's an emergency. And she's got my husband's phone number if necessary, but she's blocked on my phone. She's blocked on my email. She's blocked on social media. She's just blocked. Because there comes a point where you have to simply say, that's enough. And if you don't get that it's enough, then, and I'm going to tell you what I'm going to be honest with you guys and tell you what my boundary is for her. We cannot have a conversation over the phone until she takes her medication. My mother's bipolar, and I just can't do it. She has to take her medication. And if she loves me the way she says she loves me, then she'll take her medication so that we can have the relationship that she says she wants. Because with her not taking her medication, that's bound to hit me at some point, and I won't know when it's going to hit me. And I just won't take the chance after all of the growth that I've made and after all of the time that I've put in. You guys have to know you've put in too much time to let these people back into your life. You put in way too much time to allow them to come back in and destroy what you've built. You've put in way too much time breaking the cycle. And then you let them come back in and you find yourself once again, 12 years old, responding to your mother in a way that only a 12-year-old responds to a mother. I want to go through these quickly. So that was my vulnerable moment tonight. I didn't know if I wanted to share all that, but I did. So I've shared it. Number 2, I said, was the taker. Number 3 is the absent person, the absent toxic person. They don't return phone calls or text messages. You don't know if they got it. That relationship takes way too much guesswork. They just absent. They don't know when to show up. They don't even show up. The manipulators, number 4. Manipulators will steal your joy as though you made it just for them. They will manipulate any situation. They'll let you know, make you feel like they're there for you, and it's all about you, when in truth, the context of it all is they're there to get words to use against you, and they're there in order to manipulate the situation for their own gain. The argument, before you know it, if you're starting to argue with a manipulator, it goes in circles and goes round and round and round, and you have no resolution with a manipulator. And they only hear things through a very negative lens. Sorry, this went off. I need to go live again. I'm finishing up. Hopefully we can get Regina back on here. But they only hear things through a negative lens. That's the only way that they hear things. They will use your weakness against you, and they'll use your strengths, your kindness, your openness, your need for stability in relationships. Come on. You've been abandoned. They know it. You've been rejected. They know it. So they're going to use all of that in order to keep the friendship going for their good. That's somebody you need to let the good Lord, let the door hit you where the good Lord split you. You need to let them go. Hey, Regina, I'm glad you found your way back on. It only lets me go for an hour on Instagram, and I'm going to cut this short here in a moment. Number 5 is the BSer. I don't want to say the whole word on here because somebody going to inbox me. They talk themselves up. They talk themselves up one side and down the other. They'll lie outright. They'll tell you what they want you to know, and there's no honesty, which means there's no intimacy with the BSer. And you need intimacy in order to have real relationships. They don't have any intimacy. You know why? Because they don't ever want you to see into who they truly are. And you'll find your way into them. You'll find your way. You'll know exactly. Hey, Ms. Wright, you'll find your way to go, okay, something's off about them. Something's not quite right about them. You don't want any BSers in your life. Bullshitters. Thank you. That's what it says here. And I'm going to post this particular article on, this is the one I'm going to post because this is not my own words. This is an article. The other ones were my own words. Okay, so the attention seeker. This is someone who They just want to be needed. It's kind of like what we were talking about earlier, that person who needs those words of affirmation. But you got to be ready when this person comes around. You got to be ready for the aggression, the passive aggression, and the angst or the guilt trip if you don't respond the way that they need you to respond. That's who the attention seeker is. If you don't respond and they're a victim and, oh, you're there for the friend, then guess what? It's going to be a problem, because then they're going to be passive aggressive or even aggressive. So let them see the door too. The one who wants you to change, they want to change you. You don't have the stuff right. And as long as you're working on change, look, this is what this says that I thought was crazy. It's one thing to let you know that the adorable snort thing that you do when you laugh is adorable. But when you're constantly reminded that you aren't smart enough, good looking enough, skinny enough, strong enough, or you have to start thinking that the only thing that isn't good about you is probably the friendship, but you keep thinking everything's wrong with me. Nothing's good for me. Nothing is good about me. That person is the person who always wants to change you. These people will make you doubt yourself by solely convincing you that they know best and that they're doing it all just for you. Let them see the door too. And then you've got the abuser here, the jealous one, the worst one off. You know how you be like, oh, I got this going on. Oh, child, mine was worse than yours. Oh, they got this going on. Oh, girl, I had something worse than that. That person, let them go too. The cheater, the liar, the one who laughs at your dreams. That would be the first person I would let go of. So when you have a toxic mother, these are the ways that you manifest you becoming your toxic mother. What's going on, Israel? Tokyo? Your friend Israel's on here. Say hey. See, my dog doesn't like licking faces, you guys. That's a good thing. What else did I want to touch into? Okay, so really quickly, before I have to get off of here, I want to give you some self-care notes. And these are my personal things that I do. I want to give you guys some self-care notes, because a little bit, I know this was a little bit more about us, which makes it a little bit harder. Hey, Santa, oh, good to see you tonight. We're almost done. I did the other hour already. So let's talk about self-care really quickly. Because tonight is a little different, and I say that again. It's a little different because tonight we don't just get to be disgruntled. Tonight we got to really dig deep. Tonight we got to kind of say, okay, who am I? Why would how have I manifested this in my own life? And hopefully, prayerfully, this helped you. Now, I don't know if I saw all the comments simply because Be Live makes it a little bit harder to see some of the comments that are on here. But let me give you some self-care tips when you have a toxic mother. Sorry, I'm trying to get to my notes I had here. The screen froze a little bit. So before you go to bed, here's some tips on how to deal with yourself and have some self-care after exiting the relationship with a toxic family member or a toxic mother. Surround yourself with positive people. People who can hold you accountable. Mother's Day rolls around, and guess what I want to do? Call my mother. And everyone's like, nope. Now she gets a gift. It's part of honoring. Be clear. She gets a gift. Don't do that. Because I heard some of y'all like, oh, you don't call your mom on Mama's Day? No. But I send her a gift. She gets a card. Because getting on the phone will draw me in. Maintain a good constant support group. Maybe that's something we need to do. Maybe I need to add another group and call it I've Got Mommy Issues. There's one that's called I've Got Daddy Issues already. But maybe I need to add I've Got Mommy Issues, and that becomes our support group. I'll have to think about that. Practice self-care, whether that's exercising, reading a good book, or buying yourself a gift. Every time I get paid, I buy myself something. That's something I do. I journal. I go to therapy. I read. I'm back to exercising, which is a beautiful thing because it helps you maintain and deal with the stress. Not maintain, but maintenance concerning the stress. Do not allow feelings of regret and self-doubt to manifest on a regular basis. Many of you expressed you had issues of self-doubt, and you also had concerns just simply about feeling guilty and regret. You have to let that go. If you are doing the things that you're supposed to do by honoring your mother, we're talking about toxic mothers tonight, honoring your mother, then that means that there should not be any guilt. Once again, setting boundaries, making sure that you honor her means that my mother likes cards, right? She likes gifts. That's our love language, okay? So those are the things that my husband and I do. Make sure that those things are sent to her, not just on birthdays, not just on holidays, but here and there, just because. Take time for yourself before you dive back into another relationship, not just a relationship with your mother, but before you move forward into a new relationship. I know y'all try to use these phrases, ain't nothing better than new booty, you know, that whole, what is it? Sano said he no longer has any doubt or guilt. But y'all, how does it go? Oh, I'm sorry. See, this proves you I don't talk like this, but basically, when you get a new relationship, you out of an old relationship, you quickly move into a new relationship. You move into a new relationship simply because you don't want to be rejected. You don't want to be abandoned. And so you're moving into this place of new relationship so that doesn't look that way. But self-care means that I'm going to hold out and I'm going to deal with me and look at me and do some soul searching and deal with some stuff that I got going on. This is the book that we're reading right now in our marriage coaching class. How many of you read this book? I think it's very important because if you grow up in a toxic household with a toxic mother, you learn to suppress your emotions, you learn not to communicate them, and you might need to read this book. I'll put that up there too. You might need to read that book because it gives you insight into how that even happened to you in the first place. Because guess what? Another way to have self-care is to talk about your feelings. Talking about your feelings is a coping mechanism of self-care. Sano says he's been taking trips. He feels a lot better. See, some of us like to travel. Some of us like to read. Some of us like to write and journal. I like to do a few things. Shopping is one of them. I hate to say it like that because now it sounds crazy after I told you that very emotional journey and story. But I do like to buy myself something here and there. And then I like to, I'm a journaler. I have my journal right here actually on the floor. And I have tons of these laying around. My favorite are at Walmart and they look like this because the paper is great. See, I've already gotten into this one so bad it's starting to rip. But I have tons of those because I love those journals. And I always keep a journal and a pen next to my bed because you just never know. But those are some of the ways that you can deal with self-care. And guess what? Make new friends. We are not living in the day of age of no new friends. We need new friends. We live in Fort Lauderdale. My husband and I were just talking about we need new friends. We need married friends in Fort Lauderdale because it's not easy making new friends, especially the older you get. And then you move to a new city. But I want you guys to understand, I hope I see the numbers because it's getting late and we've now been on here a little over an hour. I want you guys to know that I hope you heard me tonight and I hope you saw aspects of yourself in the conversation that I had with you tonight. Not here to rip you apart, not here to diminish the impact your single mom, not your single mom, your toxic mom, but more than likely a single mom, the process had on you of her growing up in this household, growing up in this toxic environment has had on you. I'm not diminishing it tonight. I'm just showing you how it manifested it in your life so that you could then do the work necessary on you and not totally put the focus and the onus on her. We are now adults who are sitting on here right now, and we have the ability to break the curse and change the patterns and the cycles within our own lives. And if we don't change those patterns, we will then respond like I was when I was in my 20s, doing things that were contrary to my true character, doing things contrary to who I truly was. And now the enemy, whether my mother or somebody could take this off of this right now and try to say the same thing. I'm okay because I revealed it. I'm the one who shared it. And so you can utilize that and you can take that and try to say, oh, this is what she's been, this is who she is. It's not who I am, but it's what the environment created. And because my environment created that, I have to own that part of my journey and own who I am and who I was at that time and how I got myself into that place in the first place. So I hope this helped you. I hope it gave you some insight and it gave you an understanding as to how you need to grow to be a better person for your children, for yourself first, but for your children, for your soon come relationships, and for the relationships that you're in, and even your friendships. Because without them, without those friendships, I'm telling you right now, you're not who you need to be. Our friendships help carve out who we are supposed to be. They rub off. Iron sharpens iron. And it makes us better, and it makes us sharper to be conscious and aware of how we move and how we show up in this world. I want to move and show up differently. I want to move and show up better. I want to move and show up in a way that is not just pleasing to my family and my mother, but is pleasing to God. And having a toxic mother could have led me in a very different direction. But because I gained hold of it and I overcame it, and because I had to look myself in the face and be honest with me, I was then able to say, you know what, Tori, that's not going to work. You know where God is taking you. You know who you truly are. So now it's time to heal that so that you can respond differently. The only way you respond differently, my loves, is by healing it. And the only way you heal it is by letting whatever needs to be revealed come forth, you acknowledge it, and then you come face to face with whatever tools you need to deal with or you need to put in motion in order to be the person that you're called to be. I hope this, once again, I hope this helped you. I look forward to talking to you guys next week. Next week, I think we're going to talk about something. It's going to be something different, clearly, but I think we're going to talk about something that is going to blow your mind a little bit. And I hope you're ready for it, because it's time for us to have an awesome life and be free. And so I will say this, I'm Dr. Tori J, and I thank you for tuning in for Healing Tuesday. Healing Tuesday is all about you getting the healing that you need. And if I have to share stories like I did tonight, and I've done it multiple times, tonight was a little more revealing, but I did it because I want you to get the freedom that you need and the healing that you need, knowing that other people have gone through it, and they may have gone through it in a different way, but they've still gone through it. But I'm here every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. And starting this Thursday, woohoo, I'm going to come on with some tools and some other resources to help those who are going through denied access, custody battles, parental alienation. I'm going to introduce you to some of the people who I've worked with who helped me get through or get the cases that come into our office through some of the loopholes and some of the obstacles that they've had for years in order for them to be successful. So I look forward to having the dialogue with you on Thursdays. I believe it's at 1 o'clock. I'm trying to get the person to come on at 1 o'clock just because that's a good time for me. You can watch it in replay. And for those of you who are watching this in replay, please put replay in the box. And I'll see you guys next Tuesday night at 9. You have a great night. Bye-bye.